Mine starts basically with the misdiagnosis in a doctor's office. At the time, I was working for CBS News Division and keeping a very busy schedule. I went in and they diagnosed me as having a stomach ulcer, giving me Tagamet.
Mm.
Um, and this was during towards the tail end of the AIDS epidemic. And I began to lose weight
Mm.
considerably throughout the summer. I went in June 4th, 1987.
Wow.
And throughout the summer, I began to drop, 10 pounds, 15 pounds. I'd gotten so thin, and CBS being a very conservative news organization, I was stuffing my suits with newspaper and Kleenex and putting makeup on my face because I began to get these brown lesions on my face. I didn't know at the time that I had tuberculosis. I didn't know at the time that I had Crohn's disease. They were
Mm.
treating me for a stomach ulcer. So taking responsibility for my part, I did not go into the doctor's offices as I should have because I was traveling. And by the time I got into November, we were wrapping up on a tribute to one of our actresses on CBS morning show. And I went to a birthday party for myself where another person was throwing me a party. And I think it was somewhere between the cake and the booze. I could feel myself just going. And but I had been bleeding all throughout the summer, and I just wasn't taking care of myself. Went into the bathroom, and the perfect storm took over. A friend rushed me to the hospital. I went home actually before we went to the hospital, changed out of my suit and tie, and put on some thrift clothes, which is probably the worst thing to do. And when we got to the hospital, they thought I was homeless, and I had left all my information there at the condo. So the check-in procedure was really wrought with just so much. Anything that could have gone wrong did. So 543 to the punch here. They wouldn't check me in because they thought I was homeless. I didn't have my insurance information with me. And if it hadn't been for a friend, just screaming and demanding that they check me in, I don't know that would have happened. I'm sure at that time, back during the late 80s, so many AIDS patients were being left to die in the alleyways and the hallways, kind of similar to what's going on now. There was so much fear and pandemonium going on with that, and they just assumed that I was had the AIDS, with the tail end of the AIDS virus, and I was dying and come into the hospital, and they didn't want to check me in. So I remember the nurse finally showed up and was reeling me down towards ER, and he freaked out. He was suited up like I was radioactive.
Mm.
And he looked down at me, and I could see his perspiration, on his forehead. I couldn't see his eyes, just his forehead. And he pushed me into the hallway and just kind of left me there.
Wow.
And so I don't know how long I was there. It must have been 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. I was just bending over in pain. Didn't know I had a perforated viscus. I had basically had I guess the intestinal tract was erupting inside, and I was bleeding internally as well as bleeding externally. Mm. So by the time they got me into the ER, I mean, I was a goner. I'd been bleeding all summer. I dropped down to, I think at that time I was down to 110 pounds. And by the time I got into the ER, I mean, they didn't want to check me in. They didn't want me to go in the OR. If it hadn't been for Nurse Betty Sullivan, I don't know what would have happened, but she made sure that I got into the OR. By the time I got into the OR, again, I had lost so much blood. They couldn't keep the IVs in my arms, and because they kept collapsing. And so I remember when I got into onto the operating table, I couldn't tell you what happened at that moment. I was kind of in and out of consciousness, but I began to see a rotating tunnel over a digital clock. And I remember him saying, we need to get him hooked up to the IVs because, we're losing him. And so I think they had me turn over on my side. And I guess, Jeff, at that time, it was like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I remember seeing a snap, and I could feel something attached to my solar plexus. And it almost like just attached itself, and I could see this rotating tunnel spinning around. But at the same time, Peter Anthony was hovering over Peter Anthony in physical form. And I could see myself looking down, on the operating table and seeing them go to medical protocol. At the same time, I guess the spirit part of me, or the essence part of me, was being, I guess, vacuumed into this tunnel. So at this time, I began to see familiar faces, and I remember looking at the clock. It was a big clock. I remember it was 11:11, and it was just bizarre because this was November the 11th. I was in operating room number 11, and I was clinically dead at 11:11 in operating room 11 on November the 11th. So when I began to spin through the tunnel, I think one of the most fascinating things, and so many of us who've gone through the tunnels, we all have our stories to share. But I began to see mathematical equations, quantum physics. Now, I'm an artist, or was an artist, and I mean, all these equations were foreign to me. But at the time, it was making sense. Part of what I was seeing were the triple codes: 222, 333, 444, 999, 888. Again, looking back at that moment in time, after I recovered from my near-death experience, it didn't make sense. Then it did. But I also was seeing mathematical codes. And part of that, it was like I was being downloaded with information. The other thing was that the sound that I was experiencing was just beyond anything that I had experienced, especially being in the film industry. And the colors were just, there were colors that I couldn't even explain, colors I'd never seen before. And so imagine going through this tunnel as you're spinning through, and you're just going through this tunnel, and mathematical equations of being downloaded into your consciousness. But the thing that I found most interesting, and many people have asked me about this, was collective intelligence. I not only downloaded the mathematical equations, but imagine reading the Bible in less than 3 seconds and downloading it in your consciousness in spirit form, and you getting every bit of it. The same thing happened with, everything I was taught in school. From 0 to 60, so much information was coming into my intelligence. I call it the collective intelligence, and I got every bit of it. So for me, it was looking back at it, even to this day, when people come over, they see me. To this day, I cannot get enough information. I can read 2 or 3 newspapers and emails, and working on a script. I'm working on my conclusion with the next book. Listening to my headphones, listening to music, and I'm just constantly, it looks like I'm on some kind of drug, but I'm just all over the place, but it all makes sense to me. So to this day, because of that, going the other side, I cannot get enough information. As I went into my, I guess what we call the life review, I think for me, and like so many of us who've had the life review, when you go through this tunnel, the first thing, and it's an overriding theme for many of us who've had near-death experiences, you feel this sense of peace. You feel this sense of calm. You feel this sense of love, like you've never experienced love before. I kind of tell people, imagine the love you have for your dog or your cat or your wife or your child, and multiply that 10 times 1 million. The love that you feel during this tunnel it doesn't compare to anything that you experience, while you're here in this physical form. So that sense of peace and love and calm and stillness, and it's not like you're questioning what you're doing and why you're seeing mathematical codes and why you're seeing these colors and these sounds, or they're unexplainable. You're not going into logical, understanding of what's happening as much as you're accepting. It's real important. When you're going through this tunnel, you don't question it. You just accept it as though I'm having a conversation with you, and we go to the next level of conversation, and there it is. So when I got to my life review, and so many of us who do have these life reviews, not many, there are many who do not, but many of us do. Again, your life goes 0 to 60, and every minute of your life, which I think is very important, everything that you do is based upon choice. Every moment you had in life, from the time that you were even a child, as an adult, I think what I learned from all this in this particular time of my life is that there's no such thing as a victim.
Excuse me.
You are the person that's made the choices. So when you've made those choices, you have to kind of fess up. If you have done something that you don't feel comfortable with. I think for me, having seen what I call the matrix on the other side, I'm very aware of that when I do something, an example like having a conversation. Well, I mentioned to you I was hacked, and dealing with American Express and the different accounts. And some people are really great, other people aren't. And you kind of lose that sense of patience, and you're having that kind of heated conversation when you're stressed out. And I go back to that moment like, okay, now this is not serving you. So get into a state of centeredness, and then get on to this conversation. So as I said, so I'm well aware that every choice I make at this time in my life, living now, is based upon a choice. And that's what I learned on the other side. So I think, as I said, for me, the most important thing that I could share with your audience is that everything you do, every relationship, every job that you have, if you decide to go to school or not go to school, to take that drink, if you're a drug addict or an alcoholic or not, or that drug, that's entirely your choice. We are given a choice. And so I kind of come back with this theory of, everything I do on this planet not only is based upon my choice, but also is based upon what can I do today that makes my day better. So getting to the other side in my life review, 0 to 60, as I mentioned before, I saw my life from the time I was born, in the hospital, and I saw myself die in the hospital at 11:11 p.m. on November the 11th. Everything that we do, every moment, the conversations, the people that you've forgotten about, going to a park and sitting there and reading a book, seeing that part of your life that you've just completely forgotten about, those relationships that you had. I remember seeing a young boy that I played with. His name was David. I didn't know. I had completely forgotten, but there he was, my third grade teacher. I mean, everything was my movie. And when you understand that it's your movie and that you are the star in this movie, and everything around you is basically the extras, sometimes the guest stars, sometimes the co-stars, and sometimes the main star. This is all a part of the equation of our life. And I got a chance to see it. And so, as I said, I saw some things that I must say that, I've said so many times on these interviews. It's not that I murdered somebody. It's not that I robbed a bank, but I did get a chance to see some things, what I call human error, where I didn't shine. And I saw myself where I could have done things a little bit better. So for me, that was real important.